I'm very pleased to welcome my guest today. She is what I would describe as a community volunteer extraordinaire. From spray pads to Canada Day celebrations, she could be relied upon to help out her community in many ways. I met her when we used to share a panel on the Friday Four on 570 AM radio. In 2018, she decided to take the plunge, and she ran to become a councillor in Wimot Township. She was elected in 2018, one of a triumvirate of women who balanced out the previous male-dominated council. She, along with her two fellow councillors, were the first women elected in over 40 years to Wilmot Council. She served for one term and lost in her re-election bid in 2022. I'm happy to have her here today on the Old Grey Mayor's podcast to share with us her experiences as a community volunteer and councillor. Please welcome to the OGM podcast, my friend, Angie Hallman.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you know what? I'm glad you agreed to come on because I think you have so much experience to share. I know it's, we're post 2022, but knowing what a positive, energetic person you are, life's little missteps don't cause you to trip and fall and stay down for very long. So I know you're pushing along and all of that, and I'm glad you're here because I think you have a great story to tell through this podcast about your experiences as a volunteer and your time as a councillor and how things get done. And at the end of this, I'm going to ask you a question that I think I just thought of this the other day. I'm not going to tell you what it is now, but I think it's an interesting one. And it speaks to the dynamic of being on one side of the table and then on the other side of the table. And what I mean is a community volunteer and then later a politician. Because I remember when I got elected mayor, I would always think as a community volunteer, you're wondering what the councillors might think about what your project is. But then once you're a councillor, you kind of know because you're the councillor, so you kind of know what to think. But anyway, let's talk about. I want to talk about your background in your connection to Wilmot. It's a long-standing connection. Why don't you just tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of always feel like my story starts with my grandfather coming to Canada. He came to Canada from Italy looking for better opportunity for his family. And it was a story that is fond to me and kind of connects back through so many layers of my life. So my mother is she came to Canada with him at 6 years old with her siblings and my grandmother. He first came all the way across to Halifax, took a train through all these major cities. And I loved him telling these stories because he was like, Montreal, massive city, Toronto, great city. And then he gets to New Hamburg, where his brother had told him about this job at Stanley Hardware. And he gets off here and he's like, oh, you go from big city life of Italy to all of these cities through Canada. And he got here to Wilmot.
But Wilmot was his destination, right? Because he was going to work, you said, at the Stanley factory.
That's correct. Yeah.
And just so people know, what does Stanley do? What did they do back then? What were they making?
It was a manufacturing hardware. So like hinges, doorknobs, that kind of thing, screws, nails. Yeah. So didn't speak one word English.
So while he may have been shocked when he got here, he obviously liked it.
Absolutely. So he... this was home. This was his forever home. He loved bringing our relatives from Italy to here to see the life that he had built for his family and the generations to come. And he invested so much into making sure that the generations after him were successful. So my sister and I, college and university educated, all of my cousins as well. So he put a lot of his passion into knowing that his risks would pay off for generations, and I'm forever indebted to them for making that decision.
Is that your no from on your mom's side or your dad's side?
That's no from my mom's side. Yes.
Okay, so obviously, your mom stayed in the area then, right?
Yeah.
She married.
She married so my dad is French Canadian. So I always say that I have the best mix of piss and vinegar that you'll ever find because, French Canadian and Italian passion sums me up pretty well.
It's funny you say that because, we have a similar background in a sense because my mom came from Italy, but it was in the 40s to this country. And she married a German guy that she met, actually Ukrainian born, German mother, et cetera, et cetera. You know, it's a mixed bag. But they met here, and people always say to me, because when you said piss and vinegar, it made me think of this. They always say, "Do you speak German or Italian?" And I said, "No, I just speak English, but it's always loud." That's how it was in the household.
100%.
So you then went to school in the area because you're born and raised here in Wilmot, right?
I did, yeah. So I, spent most of my time at Forest Glen for public school, then went off to Waterloo, Oxford. I've always been a dedicated, passionate person. And one of the things along my story that is kind of interesting to people, now being a mother of someone at this age, my oldest is grade 9. And I decided I wanted to be in healthcare in grade 8 and kind of set my path hardcore on that, like sciences, business, joining DECA, kind of knew my destination. And, when I think back now of how confident I was in that decision and looking at my child in grade 9, be like, keep your options open. And, hearing that those voices of my family saying those things, but I knew what I wanted and sought out for it.
I think, it just dawned on me, there's a theme here to your life because you get focused on something, you have a plan to make it happen, and you make it happen.
Yeah.
Like it extends to it's the other things we're going to talk about, like spray pads and all the other stuff, Canada Day celebrations. So it's like very focused. And yeah, in high school, then that was some of your earliest community involvement in a sense, right? You mentioned DECA, but you also had an Echo Club too, right?
Yeah. So I feel like my passion, again, this kind of brings back to my grandparents and that experience of Italy. Really passionate about reduce, reuse, recycle. Kind of like I always said, I was one of the first generations of really latching onto that and seeing the need. I think sometimes people get too filled with doom and gloom with what can I do about climate change? What can I do about this? And for me, it was, pick something and do what you can in your corner of the world, because if we all do it, then we make a change. So absolutely, getting involved with the eco team was kind of one of my first foundational things. As early as Forest Glen in public school.
Yeah. So you are a RMT, right? A registered massage therapist. And you're saying that you knew that's what you wanted to be when you were like in grade 8?
Grade 8. We had a teacher come in to do career counseling to help you pick your courses in high school. And that I knew then that healthcare and the wellness side of healthcare was where I wanted to be, but also knew that eventually that would unfold. I took business, that I would want to, be a business owner, and I have a clinic now, and I love it.
Yeah, and when you got right out of, because you would have gone to the Canadian College of Massage and Hydrotherapy.
I did, yeah. So I applied to colleges across Ontario. And I ended up sticking close to home. I mean, how could you not when you have such an amazing, tight-knit family? And, you can have your laundry done, the food, great food on the table.
That's where we have a similar background. When I went to Laurier, I was living in Waterloo, and I never thought twice about moving out. My Italian mother just took care of everything. So I don't realize now how spoiled I was, but yeah, they just took care of everything. Not a question about anything, right? So that's funny. So, and did you open your clinic right away when you got out, or did you work for a little while for somebody?
I did work for somebody else. I see value in that and learning from someone else. And I was very fortunate that she took me under her wing. And then when she ended up moving provinces, it gave me an opportunity to really launch into the next phase of my dream and start my own clinic.
Yeah, I know. And I visited your clinic. You have a very nice clinic in New Hamburg, and a growing clinic. So that's fantastic. So let's start to talk about. So now you're in business. You're in the community. It's your home. Forever. So the community, and you've done high school things in terms of volunteerism. What are some of the earliest things you start to get involved with? When you're outside of school, in business, in the community, what are some of those?
So, I was reflecting on this, and I think one of my first really big engagement things of getting the passion really rolling in a really big political sense was being a mom and serving on school council was one of my earliest really political things. But what really lit that fire for me was at the time, New Dundee Public School is a small school, and they were looking at, and it's only a K-6 school. our children were going to grade 7 and 8 at Baden Public, which was vastly growing, and they were going to remove our New Dundee Public kids from there. And all options were on the table. Were they going to send the kids to Huron Heights? Were they going to send them to another school within Wilmot? And I was like, heck no, you're not sending my country kids to the city. So I guess that kind of what really got me, unwrapping policy procedure and kind of getting in deep that way.
I just want to interrupt for a second. I always say to people, I said, one of the things I would never run for a school board trustee. I said, because there's nothing like a meeting where and I'm not even talking about what's going on now, the various issues they're dealing with, but back as you brought up, school boundary changes brought out the most difficult meetings, the biggest, the most raucous meetings ever. And I always thought, you just couldn't pay me enough to have to go through that sort of thing. So what happened in that situation?
So in that situation, they decided there was a bunch of passionate mamas, let me tell you, who
yes.
had boisterous opinions, and we weren't going to let that change. And so our kids ended up going to Surratt and Beck. They built an extension at Surratt and Beck. They stayed within the community, which is also, I actually personally like that, because they have a transition experience and then they go off to WO for another transition.
Right.
So they stayed with the rural community. But I will never forget, they did say at some point in the future, we're going to have to discuss the life and the existence of New Dundee. And I looked him square in the face and I said, I will be there with not just these mamas, but every other mama I can find. So
and what is the current status of New Dundee?
So the current status is I still serve as chair of that council, and it's great. It's a lovely school, and we have not heard any hauntingly comments about it.
Still standing. I'm still standing. There's another song. Yes. We'll add some songs to these various things. Angie and I'm still standing. So it's good for you, because that would have been how many years now that you've been on this council for this school? 2013. I've been there since. Yeah. Good for you and good for them. Absolutely. So what was the next thing that you can recall getting involved with in your community?
Yeah. So then I noticed there was a big, being a young mom at the time and really passionate about outdoor activities. And our community didn't have a spray pad. And we had to go to Wellesley, Kitchener, Waterloo to have this experience for kids.
Right.
So kind of dived in with challenging council on when was this going to be in the budget? When are you going to consider this? And I wasn't gaining any traction. And I was really frustrated with the lack of engagement from the municipality, from the elected officials at that time. And I said, I'm doing it.
Yeah, so, you know what? I just want to stop you for a second there on that point, because I think that's very, very educational. I just got elected as regional councillor, and during my time as mayor too. You'll hear from people in the community, and they'll have a lot of good ideas, and we really have to make an effort to try to either explain why it's not part of the budget or to get it into the budget, so at least we can show that people are being heard and understanding why something is going the way it is. But it's very difficult because I just get the impression sometimes people will provide ideas and they don't go anywhere, and no one's really providing them with guidance to say, this is how, if you want a part of this budget, this is what you need to do. You need an advocate to put it forward. So your experience was you would be talking to councillors and staff, or just staff, or who were you talking to when you were trying to see something happen?
All of the above. I had asked for meetings with elected officials to be like, here's my vision. And I had done a lot of legwork already, had reached out to the neighboring municipalities. What does it cost? What does it look like operationally? And that's when I kind of dove in deep to what that looks like. And then, exploring the master plan for Wilmot and what does that look like to include this for the community. And I wasn't getting anywhere. And
wouldn't the councillor just say, yeah, it's a great idea, we got to add it to the budget? I mean,
it would have been great, but I didn't get that support. They did not see the value at the time
of a spray pad.
Yeah, no.
And we're talking, this is around 2012.
Correct. Yeah. It opened up in 2013 when my youngest was born.
Yeah. Opened up. I remember in North Dumfries, we had just built or just finished off the North Dumfries Community Center, and we had a spray pad for the first time as part of that project overall. So yeah, we always say, everyone will say splash pad, but they say spray pad because there's no 6 inches of water to waddle around in or whatever. So okay, so you're talking to the staff, you're talking to the politicians, you're getting, from your perspective, no traction. Were you doing this on your own, or did you have a team of people that were helping you at the time?
So it started with me on my own, and then started reaching out to the community, and people started seeing my vision and seeing that they wanted this and they would value this. So then it became, there was mums and dads in the community who joined with me, and we really started as grassroots as it gets. We started meeting, we started inviting different service clubs to be part of the conversation as well. We started applying for funding, started attending all of the community events, like literally down to like little fishing ponds to raise whatever we could, $100 at a time.
Let me ask you though, before you start raising money though, there has to be something. Was there a plan? Was there a commitment from the township, or what was the basis? Or you just started raising some money and then hoping that the two worlds would collide and something would happen?
Yes, we started to show our commitment that we weren't going away, that this was going to be, that we were serious. And then township staff started attending our meetings, which was great. And then that's a big step forward for sure. And then it was like, okay, yeah, you have the, and then they when we got to that point and they saw our commitment, it was great. They saw that we weren't just throwing ideas, we were in it for the long haul. And if it was going to take however long it was going to take, we were going to do it. And
you weren't just saying, we have an idea, you guys pay for it, township pay for it.
Yeah, we were along for the ride. And so then it became really great talking about site locations, what that meant operationally for staff. Of course, everyone wanted the first one to be in their corner of the community, but what did that look like? So it ended up being at the rec complex, because something that was important to me going back to environmental conservation was ours is a recycled water system. So there's so like a pool under the ground, right? So it requires the same attention for municipal staff to make sure the water is safe and potable. And it was a really great journey. We applied for funding.
Well, let's hold on. You jump. This is like we want a spray pad. Yada yada yada. We got to build. We're on the yada yada yada. We want the detail. So when did the politicians start to come on board? Because they're the ones that vote. Staff doesn't vote.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. When did the politicians come on board? So I think as we started applying for grant funding, they were paying attention. I think when they really came on board was when we were successful with the craft celebration tour. So if that's not the concept,
yes. Okay, so for everyone listening, that is a high-profile event sponsored by Kraft, the food company, that is on like the hockey Sportsnet or what have you, is a sponsor, and communities. So why don't you explain a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, it's a lot of people are familiar with more of like the Hockeyville, but it's the same thing, but for summer. So I wrote my story about why it was important to me and our community, and applied, and we submitted different videos and engaging opportunities. And we had a blast with that company and getting them engaged in our story. And then how it works is it comes down to, they kind of put you against two towns.
Yeah, you're competing against like a whole bunch, like hundreds of communities will submit a request, right?
Yeah.
Do you know how many actually submitted at that time?
I do have that data. I don't recall off the top of my head what it was.
It's a lot. So
yeah, it's a lot.
And then it gets whittled down.
All these layers. Yeah. So then
are you voting at each layer, or how do you get down to the final three?
Yeah. So we're like telling the community, you got to click for Wilmot. You've got to do this. This is, and
over what period of time is this? Is this over several months, weeks?
Over several months. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's over several months. Yeah.
So who are the final three? You and who else?
So it got down to two of us. So it got down to, and it was a small area in Toronto that wanted to do basketball courts.
Okay.
And
how much money is this? 100,000, or how much is it?
That was for 25,000.
25,000.
25,000. Yeah.
And there's a lot of time put into
so much time and effort. And then the other piece that people don't realize is when you win for the tech presentation, you throw the party for craft to come, the TSN personalities that are,
Right.
and yeah, you like we hosted the party and we threw it. So it was a riot, though. It was, you
Yeah.
know, I will always reflect back to that being great
So
fun.
did township help you with the party?
Yes, yeah, yeah, because we
Okay.
use their facilities, and yes, yeah.
So I guess by then the mayor and the rest of council is on board for a spray pad, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How is the funding going to work for the spray pad?
So it was going to be all community, like it was all going to be driven by us to fundraise those funds for it. So at the time, the township was the only thing that we were, I shouldn't say the only, but the thing the township was contributing was the land, and then the operational and taking on responsibility. That was the
And
land.
how much? What was the target? How much money was this
So it was going to cost about $130,000. So 130 to 160,000 is what
to build?
To build, yeah, to the size that
Okay.
we wanted at the time. Yeah.
All right. And how was the fundraising?
It was, you know, so yeah, so the craft celebration tour kind of really launched us.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point of we applied for federal funding and provincial funding, and we ended up getting $130,000 that way, which really launched us into the final phase of,
Wow.
of the project. Yeah.
You must have raised way more money than you needed.
No, not really. Like we did have a
Really?
little bit extra, but it came down to, and I mean, the other piece was that, I mean, like all the features, right? Like you can get simple features, simple
Yes,
things,
yes,
and kind of
yeah.
go from there. One of the things that was always my dream was getting the big bucket.
Yeah, the big
And
bucket.
thanks
Yeah.
to our local Lions Club, they sponsored the big bucket. So kind of took
Okay.
it to a whole other level.
Nice.
And my commitment that I have made and only missed because of COVID was I am there on opening day under that bucket, and I am there on closing day under that bucket. And let me tell you, when it closes in September,
Okay. Yeah.
it's a pretty experience, but I have not missed one except for COVID
That could be
time.
like a polar challenge. You could turn
kinda
that into
is.
a
It
turn
kinda
that
is.
into a fundraiser. There you
Yes.
go. That could be a polar challenge turned into a fundraiser. So that's awesome. So that was like that would have brought you into a whole bunch of different realms in terms of municipal volunteerism, the political side, the staff side, and all of that. Did you find it very eye-opening for you, that experience?
100%. Yes. Competing for funding, priorities, what your passion is about may not be what someone else's. Policy, procedure, all of those layers.
Yeah, you learn a lot, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you something more about that at the end of the show. But so let's go on. Canada Day was a big celebration and something that you're very passionate about and took on. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So in 2017, the person who was running it, 2016 actually, her name was Tina Broda. And she was running the event, and she had gone to Wilmot Council saying how if she didn't get funding and more financial support, it was done. It was going to die. They weren't getting the gate donations that they needed, and the festival was going to be done. And I had deep emotional connection to this event. My family had gone every year. You know, being raised to be so thankful for what this country has offered my family and generations.
Yeah.
It was important to me. So I had stepped up and said, you know, I would like to dive in deep and take it on and really help keep this thing going.
So how did you deal with the financial problem?
So once I had kind of, so I'm a stickler for details. So I kind of started from scratch and kind of really looked at the whole event, how it was, how do we really invigorate it. And we were also heading into Canada 150. So,
okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I had looked at, there were some layers involved with the site that it was at just for safety. There was only one exit in and out of the location. So we ended up exploring other options, which was why it ended up moving to the fairgrounds in New Hamburg. Obviously because of the fireworks, just to make sure there was more options, just in case, there was a circumstance.
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, leading into that, I also applied for a Guinness World Record, which was trying to get people to wear red crowns. At the time, hold
on. Okay. You sidetracked the funding, but I got to ask you, there's a Guinness World Record for red crowns?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it? What was it? What is it?
Okay. So we had to get, I believe it was 3,000 people.
3,000 people wearing a red crown
at one time in a confined area. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was my goal for Canada 150.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about that process. And it was a lot of, while we did, so I would say we unofficially still have that title, but Guinness did not grant us the title because we missed a couple of camera angles that they wanted.
Oh,
So
no.
it was just, I learned a lot about that because, so when you're doing a Guinness World Record at the time, I don't know if things have changed, but at the time, you had an option of hiring for $10,000 a Guinness World Record expert to come to your event.
Oh, I smell something there.
So we're trying to fundraise the whole festival and event.
Yes.
So we're like, we'll do it ourselves.
Yeah.
But anyway, we
well, how many do you say unofficially you got?
Oh, we definitely had 3,500. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So yeah,
well,
it was.
Anyone I talk to, I'm going to be raising that and say that's the home of the Red Crown. But okay, so let's. But you mentioned a financing issue. So how did you address that? I mean, so the township wasn't funding this event.
So no, so the township, what they did was they offered the space. So events, you have to pay to rent the facility. So right. The township would let the community group use the township land as part of their donation to
at no charge. Okay. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So then, we reached out to businesses for sponsorship. We had switched to doing a nominal gate donation. So what that looked like was asking for adults to pay $5 at the door, and then making sure that kids had access to come on in. And the day cost $30,000 to run.
Because you're talking fireworks too, right? With this event, and that gets to be expensive.
Bouncy castles and entertainment. Over the years, we've done motorcycle stunt shows, dog stunt shows.
I saw that with the motorcycle stunts. I saw that some flying through the air with the dirt bikes and stuff. Right? Yes, I was so surprised. I have to say, Wilmot has. Compared to all the other townships in Waterloo Region combined, I would have to say Wilmot has more events that they put on through the course of the year than all the other ones combined. I mean, there's something for everything. Corn Fest, Mopar Fest, the quilt auction, the Mennonite auction that goes on, and that's just scratching the surface. But so 2017 was the sesquicentennial 150th anniversary, and so that was your big you launched into a really big one to start basically for you.
We did. It was really great.
Then you hit COVID though, so you did 2018, then you got hit by COVID, and then you had mentioned that the festival pivoted a little bit in terms of outlook or approach or recognition.
Yeah. So, during this time myself, I've been on a journey with reconciliation and understanding what I wasn't taught in school and how I want to make sure we navigate forward. So while I was raised to be this very proud Canadian, I'm kind of going through this conflict as well within myself of how can I say that while knowing the story of where we've come today? And so while I'm navigating this journey, I had I was attending powwows and taking my children to expose them to the culture of Indigenous people and their way of life. And I had an amazing opportunity to meet Chief Stacy at a powwow. And I'll never forget it, sitting beside him and kind of being able to launch into my story about kind of like running a festival and how I was feeling and what does this look like? And am I a hypocrite and all of these things? And I'll never forget his words and saying to me, it's possible for you to be proud and for you to take on what it should have always been, the Tura Wampum, walking side by side together, but make sure it's together. And that kind of changed the outlook for me, is that it was now making sure that we were reaching out to the networks of Indigenous people in the community. What does this look like going forward? And as we kept changing and pivoting and making sure we were respecting and going forward with that, when the first recovery out west had happened.
You're talking about the residential schools and the lost children. And the lost children, yes. Yeah.
So in Indigenous culture, they have sacred fires, which is a time of grieving over several days. But they do this for every single life. So as the entire country was kind of processing this, walking this journey of reconciliation and respect and grieving, the local Indigenous people had said, this is not a time to celebrate. This is a time that if you are walking with us side by side, grieve with us.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we did that. We chose to walk along side by side with them. So it was also, we had already positioned during COVID to be an online event. We were kind of heading down that path to do an online event again. And then with working along, respecting the Indigenous community and the cycle of grief and processing all of these big things that we were processing together as Canadians and Indigenous people, we did a public art display for the opportunity for children to express how they were feeling. And we attached it to a fence. And if you look up pictures, I encourage you to. Some of these ways that kids are processing this was like, there's some that you are loved. Why did we do this? It's painting these maple leaves orange.
Right. Yeah.
It was deep, and it's kind of, it was, yeah.
I remember the event and what you were doing, and I found it to be very moving. It's wonderful. I always say within our community, as we move through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s into the 2000s, it's with each generation, we become a more open and welcoming community, recognizing what's happened in the past and recognize the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's our young children and what they're learning, and clearly they are learning a lot from when you give them a project like what you gave them, and you see the message that they are producing. That's their own thoughts, right? That's their own thoughts about these issues. And it's great to see they're asking the why question. They're not just accepting the way things have always been. They are the change and the hope for the future. Yeah, that's a wonderful event. So there was a bit of a pivot then in your approach to Canada Day celebrations going forward then after that as well?
Absolutely. So we had committed to making sure that we walk side by side with Indigenous people for the festival as well, which resulted in obviously some deep and hard conversations.
Right.
Some Indigenous people, they're like, why Canada Day? Because, what it's founded in. And others were see the way that I'm trying to explain that we have to show we're committed to forward together. And what does that look like? Because that's something I can do. So we have part of the steering team is have Indigenous voice helping lead the way. And so we started the day with a sunrise ceremony, and so many people came. It was like just over the hills at 6 o'clock in the morning. Just so many people came.
Wow.
And it was amazing. And an elder in the community did a traditional pipe ceremony, which was so profound. And it felt so special to all of us to have that ceremony shared with us. So the idea from the Indigenous elder in the community was that to have the day represent the infinity symbol and together. So we had the sunrise ceremony in the morning.
Yep.
Our opening ceremonies in the afternoon had another Indigenous elder from the community who actually also is a minister within the community. And she did an opening speech about the Tura Wampum, forward together, and the true reconciliation efforts that we're trying to do. We had made sure that all Indigenous vendors didn't pay to participate, and they were very thankful. And we had so much great feedback from encompassing that. At the end of the day, we had our fireworks, and something very special happened for the fireworks. Was we had the creation story read over while the fireworks were happening.
Oh, wow.
And so many...
What's interesting though too is putting this sort of in a bit of a context for you, because you started the Canada Day in 2017, you got elected in 2018, but your own self is being more informed while you're a councillor, but you're also doing the Canada Day evolution, we'll say, in this regard. And it sort of informs some other things that we're going to talk about as well, because there's a lot of positive things I say moving forward. But I just wanted to touch briefly before we move on to you running for council. And I know we had talked about this earlier, was that mental health issues are an important issue for you. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the work you do in that area.
Yeah, so that's something that's near and dear to my heart. I do a lot of public speaking on mental health. I lost my brother-in-law to suicide in 2013. And it really shaped the way that, going through that own journey with my family and what that looks like. And volunteered a lot in my community and still do when people are going through these experiences themselves. When you've walked a journey yourself and you've lived through healing, post-trauma, PTSD, it's amazing when you can reach out and have someone who gets it and has lived it. So that's something very important to me. And I'm passionately engaged in serving the community in that way and making sure that mental health advocacy is always first and foremost with everything I do.
Yeah, it's so important, and also important to take care of oneself too. So remember
Absolutely.
that, right?
Self-care, yes.
Okay, so you're involved in a variety of things. I think there was one other thing I just wanted to the William Scott Festival.
Yes.
What is the William Scott Festival? See, that's what I'm saying about Wilmot. So many festivals. You even got one for someone named William Scott.
So yes. So I am one thing that people don't often know about me. So talking about self-care is I love riding my dirt bike. I live on a country property, and when it's, the season, I love getting home from work at night and taking my dirt bike out for a quick rip to the back of the bush and back. It's
good for you.
Yeah. So I love racing, and so I love the opportunity of soapbox derbies, and so I wanted to bring this opportunity to kids in the community. So it was a collision of a couple people in the community with a passion for different things. So I wanted to do the part of the soapbox derby. Other people in the community were like, we've always wanted to do celebrating, retelling the story of New Hamburg. And so that is the founder was William Scott, who settled here.
Oh, okay.
And so there was this whole story about, then we'll call it the William Scott Festival. And there was soapbox derby racing and learning about the story of William Scott and coming here. And so that's how that all unfolded.
Oh, okay, I got it. So I was just going to say the founder for AIR was Abel Mudge. But
anyways,
you should really do something with that. Okay, so now I think your spray pad experience was probably the biggest influence on you in terms of community activism, because that was one heck of I understand that was one heck of a lot of work you did. So was it things like that drove you to decide to run in 2018? What was behind the decision?
So much of that. So I feel like, for me, and I actually say this to a lot of people, when you're interested in, the more you get engaged in your community, the more you see the gaps of service.
Right.
And when you're advocating for these gaps to be filled and budget to be prioritized into that, and there's nothing happening, you either say, I'm putting my name on that ballot, so I have the opportunity to try and fight for what I believe to fill these gaps in the community. And that's kind of what led me to putting my name on that ballot.
That is such a common theme throughout the podcast, is people involved in the community wanting to work with their local council, but not feeling like they're being heard or responded to in terms of what they're trying to do, and then putting their name forward. So did that come out of your spray pad experience or just generally?
Yeah. But yes, all of that, like the spray pad experience, and also seeing where we had gaps in policy, gaps in communication, transparency, asking for documents didn't exist, just kind of all of this. I'm like, what is going on? Mm-hmm. And yeah.
So, okay. So you put your name on the ballot. Were you up against an incumbent?
I was, yes.
Ooh.
So the incumbent was Al Juncker, and great community person. And when I put my name on the ballot, he actually withdrew his name. So for a while,
he had already filed, yes. And so you were ready to run against Al. Yes. Now you say great community person, but then you comment about the feedback. So how do you reconcile that?
So I think that we all have different priorities in life, right? So his priorities didn't match with my priorities. Gotcha. And, I think that you can look at any human. I'm a young woman. He is not. Right. And so where he saw value and I saw value weren't the same priorities.
So going into that race, then what were your priorities going to be?
Transparency, big time on transparency, communication,
Okay.
public communication, diving deep on policy, reconciliation, diversity, inclusion. Yeah.
So and certainly, yeah, you, Cheryl, and Jen were a lot of that, a lot of positive that.
Yeah.
So then Al, so what happened then? Al Junker decided not to run.
Yeah, he took his name off the ballot. He called me to say that he, when he had heard that I'd put my name forward, that he was going to back me, and he believed in what I was trying to accomplish for the community.
And how long had he been a councillor?
Al had been a councillor for, I think it was about 16 years. So he had served in New Hamburg for two terms, I believe. And then he had moved to New Dundee, and then he served as a term in New Dundee.
Okay. And that's all within Wilmot, just for the listeners, that's all within Wilmot Township.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's fantastic. So then were you acclaimed?
I was not acclaimed. So then a resident from Mannheim had put her name on the ballot. She was a retired accountant and put her name on the ballot to serve. Yeah.
So tell me just briefly about the campaign. What was how did you do it? Like, what, you had signs, you knocked on every door? What sort of things?
Yeah. So I knocked on every door. I did signs. I went social media heavy, which was a new experience for Wilmot in general. It was an experience that they had not experienced yet. So I really love the door to door though. You got everything. And I'm not afraid of difficult conversations. So I think that's where some people are caught off guard, is because I think that we can have vastly different opinions on one thing, but we may see eye to eye on something else.
Right.
And I think that's the heart of democracy, is like really finding where we can move forward together.
I think it'd be, like they say, it's rare to find everyone 100% in agreement. I think it'd be equally fair to say it's hard to find everyone 100% in disagreement. So
I agree. We agree on that.
Exactly. So you get elected. So election night then, was it close, or how did that turn out?
No, it wasn't close. I had over 600, and I think Rose had about 300.
Okay. All right. Yeah. But so now you're going to be a first-time councillor. And it's interesting because I just did a podcast with Jean Halboom talking about her time on council. And, she said the thing she had to learn was that she was a newbie. And I think what she was running into, and I'm sure you're going to talk on this, is you got the old guard with their established ways and trying to break into that. And how do you cut through that to try and make some things happen that you as a candidate ran on and want to try to affect change? And I think one of the things that I was very proud of what you had done was you made Wilmot, I think, one of the first with a land acknowledgement at the start of your council meetings. Tell me about that process, because you would have been doing that right off the hop.
I did, right out of the gate. So one of the things that I like to tell people when they are, we're exploring their time on wanting to serve in politics, is I've said, you really have to come up with a list of things that are important to you, because when you serve, you're going to get pulled in a million directions and priorities, but you really have to look at the big picture and what are some big, meaningful steps that you really want to push forward in. And for me, that was EDI and reconciliation. So I wanted us to acknowledge the territory and land which Wilmot is on. And you would think that should have been a very easy journey, and it was not.
Let me ask you, I don't think any council in Waterloo Region at the time had a land acknowledgement.
That is true. We were the first.
Where were you seeing it done in other kind of nearby municipalities? Were you seeing it anywhere?
No, you know what? It had to do a lot with the relationships that I had built within the Indigenous community.
Okay.
And how things come with when you look at the calls to action, and you would think that acknowledging existence is a pretty simple first step.
And when you say calls of action, you talk about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd gone down to Six Nations. I had met with Mississaugas, was trying to put, all of these pieces together again on my own journey.
Right after you were elected?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Continue.
So it was really important to understand those layers, and then also understanding what we're recognizing. So because there's nothing that agitates people more is a disingenuous recognition. So it had to be
I agree.
Right? Yeah. So it had to be meaningful and it had to be real. And so for me, with all of these conversations, the one treaty that kind of, again, sits home in my heart is the dish with one spoon covenant. And I think that's something every human can relate on globally, is that we only take enough of what we need and leave enough for the next generations.
Hence the dish with one spoon. Is that what?
That's the dish with one spoon covenant. That's the meaning of that one. And I actually have something the other thing is, and I had this on my desk this is a 2-row wampum that I had sitting on my desk for council. And I have it still. And I think these pieces, the dish with one spoon covenant, the 2-row treaty that we walked together side by side, these were 2 pivotal things for me, and a territory acknowledgement and a commitment. Every time I read it, I meant it.
So let me get to the point of actually doing it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's say you've got it prepared. Now, how do you make it happen?
So when I was bringing this forward to council chambers, it was quite a heated evening.
But you had a discussion with staff on this issue first, though, right?
Yes.
How'd that go?
That was not good. It was the clerk at the time is no longer with the Township of Wilmot and had not done any work on reconciliation at all. This was an entirely new bag. And I think it's also important to say that the members of council who were existing, so not Jen Sherrill, who were there before.
Yeah, the previous. But I just want to stop with the staff for a second. We're not going to get into what was exactly said, but staff was very resistant to doing that. Did they give you a reason why they were resistant?
I think it's because they didn't know. This was an area that I was well educated on and they weren't. So I think there was a lot of fear rooted in it. And then also no councillors had done motions ever. I was the first.
Really?
So yes. And so then you have this.
Okay, let me just stop there for a second, because I've never thought to touch on this, and this will be about the 45th podcast or something. Just for the listeners, any councillor can bring forward a motion about something that they would like to see happen, and if there's a seconder for the motion, then there's a debate, and after a debate, there's a vote. Now, prior to that debate, there could be an opportunity for example, staff to put together a report and come back to council, and then council has some more information and can vote on it. But any councillor can bring forward a motion. It's not only staff driven. Councillors can do that. So, that shocks me a little bit. But anyway, continue.
It does. It absolutely does. So because this is the thing, right? So previously in Wilmot, council meetings so a lot of people, just so you know, council meetings are a time for your elected officials to make decisions on things that they want to see, but also what reports staff bring. Right. But so Wilmot was only driven on staff reports. It wasn't driven on council directive. So you have this new councillor coming in, myself, with this reconciliation action item that is not done anywhere in the region of Waterloo yet at a municipal level, and brings a motion. So it was like, So
I know the feeling.
Right? And I was confident. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I had paid independently I had read Robert's rules. I had independently invested into training. I was confident in what I was doing.
I know you did your homework, because we had a conversation as well about procedures, et cetera, et cetera. So I know you did your homework. So what happened then? So once you put this motion forward, how did it get dealt with? What happened then?
Yeah, so it So it was seconded. And then we had staff commenting on asking for time to research and going back and forth. I had arranged for staff to meet with Indigenous people in the community to help them kind of embrace the learning experience. There was it was very layered and complicated trying to navigate this.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I mean, you're running your business. You got a part-time job as a councillor, and you're lining up all the research and everything for this one motion.
Yes,
right?
back up and try to convince half of the council who definitely did not seem interested.
Yeah, because I
was very passionate about.
Because you had a 6-person council, so you needed 4 out of 6 to vote in your favor, because a 3-3 vote kills the motion.
Correct.
Plus, you had to convince. I mean, you need a positive staff report too.
Yes.
Did you get a positive staff report?
In the end, yes. It took a lot of work to get there, and which is why I always say that is one of my proudest things of accomplishing in Wilmot, because acknowledgement, you can't have acknowledgement. You can't have truth if you don't have acknowledgement, and you can't.
No, 100%. You are so right. I mean, I understand this because I've walked the path you've walked with respect to council and staff and everything else, and trying to make that sort of change. That is a significant change and a significant accomplishment for which you should be congratulated, because look at what happened after. I mean, you can't have a meeting without a land acknowledgement happening now everywhere. We've got land acknowledgement. The question then, the next thing in your journey of learning and moving forward is, what do all these land acknowledgements mean? That's got to be the next step. Where are we taking it after because I'm reaching out now, speaking to various Indigenous communities, and I asked them, I said, what does a land acknowledgement mean to you? And they're going, well, what like, okay, it's good to have, but what's the outcome of that? Right. And I think that's something that has to be the next step. But anyway, I just wanted to point out for the listeners how difficult it is to affect change. As a councillor, you can, but there's a lot of layers and a lot of work that you have to do in order to do that. Okay. So moving forward, unless there was something else you wanted to add on this, I don't want to cut you off from this.
I think that's great.
Yeah. So, I was looking through some of the various things that you were dealing with. And one of the things I found interesting was the Crime Prevention Committee. Mm. And I wasn't sure if that's something you set up after you became around council, or if that was something before council.
So as a woman in this community, I had come across different various things where it was safety is a gap. So talking back again to, serving as on school, as a, on council at the school and all of these things. And SEPTED audits, knowing that our municipality hadn't completed SEPTED audits. And just to explain what that is, it's where Waterloo Regional Police or your local police come in. Yeah. They kind of look through that crime lens to see where you could have more lighting, where people could be vulnerable.
Yeah, so they walk around, they go around your community to look for these potential dangerous areas. So this is all being done after you're elected to council or before?
Correct. No,
after. Okay, yeah. Continue.
So this hadn't been done. But again, you don't have people, when you don't have representation on your council, you can't expect that lens to be there. So you've gone from 40 years of men to now you have 3 women who are saying, here's the things that I care about.
Yes.
Show me what we're doing to make it safe. And so I had put a motion for the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Committee of Council, something I was really proud about. But from
were you getting resistance with this too? Or
sure did. Yep.
You got resistance for this too?
Yeah.
From other councillors or staff?
Both.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because how many committees of council do we need to have? And I'm like, but we don't have that many in Wilmot. And again, but it was a priority that I saw. And so one of the simplest things, and it came out of COVID, was how many kids were like, stay home, don't go out. It's scary out there. You might get sick. Don't talk to people. Don't cross on the sidewalk.
Right.
And then you're like, go out, be a child. So you have kids who have gone 3 years without knowing how to use a crosswalk, without biking down a sidewalk, without knowing how to navigate their own community.
Right.
And I heard this constantly. So one of our first events was doing a bike rodeo.
Oh, safety rodeo kind of thing. Yes.
And it was so well attended. And how many people didn't have that experience about educating their kids?
Yeah, but I just want to jump in for a second before we get too far. But this is like a citizens committee that you're creating, right? Predominantly.
Correct. So yeah. So how it works is you have, I think we had 5 seats for the public, and we had 2 members of council on that committee, and then 1 staff.
Right. And then the 5, you're getting different ages or what have you. So you have different lenses, so to speak, in terms of looking at a problem from a youth senior perspective.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that citizens committees can be excellent. All right. Because you're drawing on expertise from people in your community who have day jobs, but would love to contribute based on their learned experiences, lived experiences, their education, their knowledge, and donate that back to the community in some fashion, in some way. And I know when I became mayor, we didn't have any citizens committees either, and I created 3 citizens committees in North Dumfries back in 2010. One for seniors, one for like parks and trails, and one for economic development. We didn't have any of that, and people just love to do that. But why? So when people are saying how many committees are we going to have, like the other councillors, I know council has multiple committees like finance or community services or what have you, but that's different than what you're talking about here. That's not the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So this was one of the first citizens committees that you had in Wilmot?
So there's ones that are mandated, which are like the heritage.
Right.
There was Castle Kilbride, which is a museum that we have locally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm missing. But anyway, this was one of the first. Citizen committee.
Yeah. So this is more of a volunteer, like created by the council, not mandated by any legislation.
Yes. And I want to draw on your thing about expertise, because as you had mentioned about getting people in the community, we had 2 police officers in their day job serve on our crime prevention committee, because the juxtaposition from them is that they see things happening in the community and their day job, but this avenue gave an opportunity to be like, we really need youth to be educated on drugs or whatever in the community. We need parents to be educated on drugs in the community. We need parents to be educated on where kids are hanging out, why vandalism is happening, why spray paint is happening, and bring that lens to the citizens group to get that information out. And it is a great way to serve your community that's not so much in the spotlight, but really gets to the, grassroots of helping navigate.
Did the Crime Prevention Committee, now I think it's called Community Safety and Crime Prevention Committee, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Did that come out of the vandalism that was happening in the parks, that sort of thing? There was something I saw, like Sir Adam Beck Park, or maybe I have the name wrong or what have you. There was some vandalism, and I wasn't sure if that sort of drove the need for this.
It was multi-layered, because I think as our community was growing, we were seeing more needs of that. Like, as I said, yes, more vandalism was occurring. And then how do we stop it? How do we navigate it? What are we missing that the youth need as an outlet? As we had drugs increasing in our community and our local schools, it was, what can we do to help facilitate information and action to bring about change in a positive way?
Okay, I want to move to, like, you can't talk about New Hamburg without talking about flooding.
Oh, yeah. That was something else I got involved with.
Were you able to do anything from a management perspective, or what were you able to accomplish while you were there?
So Jen Fenning kind of took that one big. She was a really big advocate for pushing MNR and so the Ministry of Natural Resources, pushing in the conservation authorities, pushing high management staff at Wimot Township to really address this and look at it. We ended up having a community meeting. It was the spring a few years ago, and it was great to have them all in one room, because what happens is, as everyone likes to point the finger at the other authority. It's their fault. It's their fault. It's their fault. Right. And having them all together
it's frustrating for people. Our job is to help guide them and navigate them to the right spot, not just point to it. I always feel just pointing is not enough. You actually got to go get that information for them to really help them out.
Yes. So the result became being a study that was done. And knowing that we had to bring back some of the banks in the Nith River, looking at dam access. And so some of it's, even though I'm not there now on council, it's still rewarding seeing the work that you set in place coming to fruition now. Right. So GRCA is doing some work along the Nith River banks to make that impact improve. So hopefully we get to decrease flooding. One of the things I personally did was advocated for in every budget process was having a brain lapse on. It's a valve system that you put in your basement to help with backwater flow valve.
Okay. So people would be able to purchase or help subsidize the purchase, or how does that?
So my goal was that the Township of Wilmot would allocate funding to people in the floodplain to have the backwater flow valve, which would decrease flooding in their basements. Because for me, my outlook was that if in history past, if we allowed development in that area, we have some responsibility generationally to do. So that was something that I was actively fighting for in the budget.
And it's a nice way to assist. Absolutely. Okay, there's so many more things we could talk about, but I want to ask you this question. It's just I think it might be an interesting question. We'll see. So it's kind of like taking the two parts of your life here. So you've got councillor Angie Hallman, who is like the community volunteer, and you've got this spray pad idea and you're coming to council. And then you've got the post-election councillor Hallman, okay? And knowing what you know now, because you've done so many things, you've gotten into the weeds, you know how the system works, et cetera, et cetera. So you know how you remember how you were treated as volunteer Hallman on the spray pad and the amount of support you got from whatever level that was. If some may say it's not, I say it wasn't enough, but you may say it's fine. I would like to know, how would councillor Hallman have dealt with volunteer Hallman's request? In what way would councillor Hallman have said, we have to help? And what would that help have been on that spray pad project?
I love that question. If it was me sitting there and looking at a young mother in the face, asking for support in the community in that way, I would have had her back 100%, and navigating the systems, policies, and budget to find a way. It's different when you have someone from the community who's saying, I want this, and they turn their back. But when you have somebody who's passionately engaged and wants to succeed at improving the lives of people in their community, that's where us as elected officials, when you're in that seat, you have the ability to really change the lives and improve. When it's a true mutually beneficial relationship where citizens are engaged and you, with the tools of policy and finances through the municipality, are engaged, you can accomplish great things. And absolutely would have loved to have supported a project like that.
And that's what I thought. And I totally agree with you. I mean, you and I share a similar passion and outlook in terms of when you're in that chair and people are coming to the podium to talk about what they want to do, and they're showing how much they want to participate and how much they're willing to participate and do to make that happen. There's a huge missing piece if the council is not sharing in that journey together with all the tools that you have as a council to make that happen. Now, eventually you got it done, but that's because you got it done. Angie, if it wasn't Angie Hallman on that project, who knows if it would have got done. If there was no council support, there was some, but not quite the council support that you're talking about in terms of what you would do. And I totally agree with what you're saying. So, Angie, we've come to the end of the podcast. I just want to say it's been a great discussion with you, and we'll see about making another discussion happen on some other issues. But I just want to congratulate you on the time that you spent as a councillor. But I know that that's not the end of the Angie Hallman story. It's going to continue. You're too young for it to be the end of the Angie Hallman story. So I look forward to what you continue to do in the future. And thank you again for all you've done and all that I know you're going to do. All the best to you.
Thanks. It was great joining you today.